Hey, welcome to Brill of Guitars. Rainy Tuesday in the shed, and here I've got Colin's Tokai. So this guitar is down for some setup work and also a change of pickups. So we're going to go from these stock Chinese units. I don't know that much about these, so I don't know what brand they are or anything, but Colin wants to replace them with blues engines, a set of IronGear Blues Engines. Now, the reason he's going for that is for him the sound of these is a little bit muddy, and I think he's right in the... They are a little bit thick in the treble, full tone open position. That's with, you know, quite a lot of gain on, quite a lot of treble on, everything, and it's not quite got the clarity that he's after anyway. So nice wine coloured guitar, looks pretty well made all over. We've got a tiny bit of choking there, no bends. So we've got a high spot somewhere there on the 10th. So we've got a high spot on the 10th, and we've got a nut that's been well made. I mean, it's been deliberately made. It's a bone nut. Somebody's taken, or the factory's taken care to make it, but it's holding the strings up. There you go, on the... See, I'm turning it barely. It's not progressive, it's gripping it. So, it's a couple of things. First of all, I have made a couple of, or I'm in the process of making, you see my little production factory here. I'm in the process of making a couple of homemade bases for the adjustable nuts that I like to use on these LP guitars now, and I've got them on all of mine and I really like them. So I'm going to replace the nut on this with one of those, but I need to wait for the base to set. I can make a bone base, but actually these are a little bit better because they kind of go all the way up the edge. Now there's always a gap when you use an adjustable nut because it's got to go up and down, so you get a little bit of a gap on the side, but as I mentioned to Colin, the functionality of that far exceeds or outweighs the cosmetic issue. I've found them really good. So apart from the slight muddiness of the tone, nice, but again, for Colin's taste, he's looking for an improvement, which is great. So we've got a little bit of uneven frets up here. The frets look in reasonably good condition generally. I don't see well, there is a little evidence of fret leveling, so they may well have been done very lightly in the factory, but I'm going to need to kind of improve on that really. What I'll do is I'll kick off by doing a little bit of measuring just to see what's what before we go any further. It's funny, I listened to a podcast called No Guitar Is Safe. I recommend it. I think I've recommended it before, but I highly recommend it. It's produced or presented by a guitarist called Jude Gold, American guitarist who plays with, God blimey, I was going to say Fairport Convention. It's not. It's Jefferson Starship Plane, Airship Plane, Star Plane. whatever the latest version of that band is. Anyway, he's a young guy, youngish guy who plays. He's a sort of new guitarist in Jefferson. Anyway, he's a lovely guy actually. He's a really sweet interviewer, a really good questioner, and a really generous guitarist. And if you like playing, you'll enjoy this podcast because he sort of shares. He jams with the people he talks to. So he goes around California and other places talking to big name guitarists that most of whom you'll know, but he does it in this really nice, relaxed, chatty way. It's not, most of the time it's not like an interview, it's like just some friends jamming and all the good stuff comes out within that. I'm getting to the point. The reason I mentioned him is because this week he was jamming with Ace Frehley, Kiss guitarist, and actually two reasons I mentioned it. First one is that he'd evidently taken 2 Roland cubes with him to jam through. I can't remember what guitar Seth was playing, or Ace Frehley, for example. But anyway, I think it was one of his artist proofs. Anyway, the point was, it caught my eye when Jude Gold said, "Oh, I've got these Roland cubes," or we played through Roland cubes. And I suddenly recognised all the tones or the settings from them, which is quite funny when you hear an amp that you're familiar with each of the settings. It is actually quite a familiar tone. But the other thing that quite struck me was that on the recording, for a change, it actually sounded a little bit weedy, which is unlike, it's not common on the No Guitar Is Safe podcast. Anyway, that was one reason that came to mind. That's why it first came to mind. The other reason actually was it was interesting that it wasn't actually that good an interview for a change. In fact, Ace Frehley was, I think, one of the least comfortable interviewees, but that's an aside. Anyway, highly recommended. There's about 68, 70 odd podcasts so far, and every one of them is this kind of in-depth insight into the player, their tone, their kind of influences, and all good stuff that you can really get into. Highly recommended. No Guitar Is Safe with Jude Gold. I think it's promoted by or supported by Guitarist magazine. Anyway, so here we've got this Tokai, or as I saw advertised once, a Joe Hain. Somebody put one on Gumtree calling it a Joe, or eBay calling it a Joe Hain, which I understand. Looks like it to me. Now this is a nice lump of guitar. It's quite nicely finished. There's nothing worrying about. It's got a very slim neck. It's a made in China model. Colin says it's made under Japanese QC quality conditions. That be as it may. That doesn't kind of mean an awful lot to me. This is one of those points where I had somebody comment on YouTube this week, something like, I think it was something like, "Don't you know that Ovation would play much better with the cover on the back closed up?" And it's like, well, yes, no, I happen to be setting it up and worrying about the playing action more than at that point demonstrating the sound, because that's not what I'm here to do. If I was, I'd be a better player for a start, and or I get somebody else to do it. But no, it's not the focus. So things like this this guitar, I don't need to know lots of technical stuff about this guitar. I made a point on the last video that the whole thing about you're useless you're useless luthier if you don't know everything about this brand or this model of guitar. Well, that's not true. If it has some frets on a wooden fingerboard with a nut and a bridge, and it has some pickups on it, then almost everything that I do on every guitar applies, or every electric guitar applies to this guitar. So, whereas if you're a fan of this, it might really matter to you who the production supervisor was, or the terms and conditions under which this was made and by whom, and whether it was the not lawsuit, you know what I mean, the whole lawsuit, this and the such and such factory that doesn't really interest me, and I don't make any real apologies for it. I'm interested in setting them up, not being an expert in every single one of them. Otherwise, how could I be? There's so many guitars, it just becomes too nerdy. So what have we got? Well, we've got a Les Paul guitar, Les Paul shaped guitar. I don't know what the construction is, apart from it's a set neck. The finish looks pretty nice. It's a wine coloured, nice gold hardware, and plays okay, apart from high frets that we're hearing. And you know, the frets have a look of having been lightly leveled in a factory scenario, I have to say that much. Like I said before, there's some effort has gone into fitting a bone nut onto this beauty. I'm just going to have a look under here and see if that's been, it's not been lacquered in, so it's fitted afterwards and it's been filed, machine filed back, so you know, Dremel sanding belted back to flush. So it looks like it may have been done in the factory, it may have been done afterwards, who knows. But it's you know, it's a good quality nut. The only problem with it is that it's a little bit bindy, and in some ways, if you can get close, you can see that while everything's good about it, it ends up being quite deep. The slots end up being quite deep for, you know, these strings to sit in, and it's quite hard to keep them moving freely, as soon as the slot gets deep. Now, the idea of the slot, you know, the objection to deep slots on nuts isn't a cosmetic one, it's just a functional one. If it doesn't matter how deep the slot is, providing it isn't binding and grabbing at the string. And in this case, you can hear there's hardly any change there. It's holding that string. Not helped, of course, by the typical angle problem that you've got with the Les Paul thing. Anyway, what these tusk replacement things, which I now press into service, these were designed for the Gibson Les Paul, which has originally, I think, had a kind of brass, I think it was originally a brass nut. It has a kind of bass unit, and there's a sort of a zero fretty type nut that goes in there. This is obviously a different thing. They've kind of, what happened is, I think the reason why Tusk made this is that the Gibson in its little unit, in the nut unit, had a problem that the brass was too soft and it was wearing the zero fret part of it too quickly. So if we just show you this a minute, if I can just conceptualize this on the board, I think, if I'm mistaken, I'm just guessing at this, I think the Gibson thing had a thing that sort of kind of looked a bit like this, I think. I'm just guessing, I can't remember now. And then these were the sort of guide slots, like a nut positioning function at the back. And I think what happened is that this then sat in a base kind of like that, and then the string came up there and then came over what was effectively a zero fret there. And I think on the Gibson unit this wore too quickly, as all zero frets tend to do. And so I think Gibson replaced that with a titanium one recently, or more recently. And I think in the meantime, what Tusk did was bring out an insert which replaces this bit, right, and ends up looking very different. He says looking for, I think I've just about run out of colours. So that the Gibson, the replacement thing now kind of sort of sits in there like this. Sort of, yeah, kind of a bit like that anyway, and it's got slots in it, and as you can see, it's adjustable because it's retained it's got the screw things. The original one was adjustable too down there, and this now has angled slots to represent, you know, to reflect a Gibson headstock tune-up pattern, which I'm ambivalent about in the sense that wherever you put the stress on the string, it's going to be a problem. So that it actually, you can't solve it by changing the angle. It looks cute and it makes you visually think of a solution, but technically speaking, you know, if the string goes in straight here, goes in and has the angle at the front end, then there's going to be the pressure of the angle. On this one, it has the angle at the back. That's the only difference between the two, but the angle and the pressure point on the string is still there, whichever way you cut or slice it. So it looks like a solution, but it isn't really. Anyway, it doesn't matter, because this Tusk adjustable insert does a really good job when you create a bass. Actually, it works pretty well without a bass, funnily enough, but because the pressure keeps the string things down, and you can actually locate it in some little footings. But what I tend to do is I tend to make a base for the adjustable nut, and found that milliput is strong enough to hold it and withstand the kind of downward forces without giving way or breaking or anything. Nothing moves, so it doesn't kind of rub and abrade and dig holes or anything. It just sits there where it's meant to, which is really cool. So what we've got is the ability to take these nuts that were designed for another purpose and repurpose them for here. And I'm kind of quite confident, very confident, to take something like this and replace it with one of those things. And I think I'm pretty confident for every guitar I've put it on and the people I've recommended it to have done the same, and I've done some for Malcolm, my friend. Absolutely love how it's changed, you know, the ease of the guitar and the setting of the nut, and the tuning stability is great. The thing about this is, historically, before I was using those Tusk things, I would have spent a lot of time cutting the slots on this, and in fact I will today, just to make the action right before I get into the fret leveling part, and then we'll discard it later on and go to the Tusk nut later date when that's set. But in the meantime, you know, typically I would spend a lot of time cutting this action precise. It's not actually that bad, but it's just, it needs tweaking for adjusting the height a little bit, but also freeing up the string movement, and it's particularly problematic on these ones here where there is an angle. And you can watch my videos and think that I, you know, exist only to do this and that it's my favourite thing in the world. Actually, it's the least favourite thing. The nut is a pain in the ass, but it's the most important thing on the guitar, almost, right? If you think about the priority order of things, a guitar that plays and stays in tune actually trumps everything else. Sorry to use that phrase if you're not a fan of the President of the USA. Trumps everything else, right? If you can have the best sounding pickups, the most wicked looking guitar, if it won't stay in tune, you are not going to play it. It'll stay on the, well, you might play it in your bedroom, but you won't play with other people, and you won't play in a band, and you won't get very far. And it'll stay on the wall if you're a musician, because you just can't bear continually tuning it. So the nut, actually, pound for pound, is the most important modification you'll probably ever make on your guitar. Once you get a guitar that stays in tune because of what you do to the nut, then you'll play it more, and then it's totally worth investing in better pickups and so on. All the other good stuff that makes it enjoyable, more enjoyable. But in priority order, it's this. And I do it because it has to be right, so that you pick up that guitar and play it. And up till now, it's a pain in the butt, and you know, you can do it, but it takes time. Having found having converted that nut thanks to Tusk, and actually having made a few of my own, which I'm testing out at the moment, which are a bit harder to make, and they don't really, kind of not worth the time invested if I can buy them from Tusk, but they solve the problem for me. I can get the right first fret action. They still sometimes need a little bit of adjustment to follow the radius correctly, but once they're in place, they're great, and they are tweakable, adjustable. If you want to make any tiny alterations, you can do them without any files and whatever. So I think for £13 odd for the Tusk, and a bit of time to make the bass and a bit of time to insert it and set it, I think it's a great improvement. And I don't have a particular love of filing nut slots. In fact, I hate it, because often you overcut and then you throw the nut away to start again, and you repeat yourself quite a lot. But the ability to be able to take a unit and use it adjustably like this is actually a test piece of bone. Now, actually, that's too thin to use, really. The Tusk one isn't much thicker, but I wouldn't want to run the risk of this snapping, because bone is going to be a little bit more brittle than Tusk. Anyway, so the ideal one is the Tusk replacement one for the Gibson to go in here. I'm experimenting with ones to do in the Strat and Tele styles, which actually work quite well because they stand in a slot. Doing one of these entirely from bone, I've got one on a neck I'm doing here, and I'll see how well that works. But it has to be kind of quite a chunky thing to, you can't just, when you're using bone, I guess what I'm saying is, you can't just, I've lost it now, you can't just duplicate the Tusk dimensions, even if you could put a little bit of thickening on the back there. That's probably too, well, it'd probably play, but I don't want to run the risk of it. So anyway, I'm doing experiments, but as a proven technique, using the Tusk one here is going to be good. Meantime, I'm just going to set it up using this bone nut for a minute, because all I care about is getting a nice low first fret action, which this isn't far off anyway, and then we'll replace it a bit later on. So I'm going to do a couple of quick checks of things while I'm at it, to see what we start with, and to see how much physical improvement we can make. So at the moment we've got a pretty low action down here of, I think it's about 1.3, low E, last fret 1.3, something like that, 1.4. It's quite low. And then on the high E, we're down at about 1.2. So I'm not really sure we're going to get an awful lot of physical improvement, but the important thing is that we've got these choked out bends which we can't really live with. So we've got to take care of that. So the only way to do that is to do a fret level. Now, some people will go, well, why don't you, oh look, it's choking out on here, obviously the one after the fret. The problem is, if you just attack that fret on its own, what happens is you make this fret low relative to that one, and then you may quite easily transfer the problem along, because a low fret relative to the next one makes the next one effectively high, and then you may find yourself just chasing your tail. Now, sometimes you have to weigh this up, and it's a judgment call. If you take my word for it that it might not be a good idea to chase single fret solutions, you might think, well, I've got let's say your technique you use for fret leveling is something a little bit more hungry, which I don't use anymore, but let's say you use something like the Crimson fret leveling file, right, which is perfectly effective, it does the job, okay? But let's say you use that technique. This is quite a hungry technique, which is why Thomas, my stepson, drew a kind of scary, he was even scared to use it when we were learning, when I was showing him how to use this stuff, but he drew a face on it because it is quite hungry. The problem, and I'm not knocking this file, it does the job. The problem, compared to the method I use, is that when you use this file, you level to an absolute levelness as judged by a fret rocker. Okay, that's fine, it does the job, but it costs a certain amount in fret metal to do that. And the truth is, when you level to an absolute as judged by a fret rocker, you are leveling more than you need to for the action, because the action you're choosing has some height, and it's not like a zero height action, but the fret rocker and fret file approach treats it as if you're aiming for a zero string action, zero height string action, so it's an absolute levelness. So just remember that it's more level than you need, right? You only need level enough to make that play, okay? And if you've got one fret that's really causing the problem, and you know that it's not a good idea to do individual frets, so you're going to have to do all of them to free up that, or you have a choice, you either do all of them or you raise the action. If you insist you want the low action and you want to do a leveling to cure that choke, then the only question is which is the most efficient in terms of preserving, which method is the most efficient way of leveling all of them to free up this choke at the cost of the least amount of fret metal possible. And that's why the curved file method that I use with the strings on is a little bit less rapacious than this thing, right? And the reason we know is that we can level only until this is cleared, and then we stop. So we don't take any more, we're not leveling for an absolute flatness, so that by the time we clear this, we still would expect with a fret rocker to hear possibly some unevenness, but we don't care because it's effectively below the level of the action we've set. So that's why in my setup I always aim for the setup of the action we want first, then, which we're pretty close to on the action here, then discover the limitations, make sure the three parts are correct, the last fret action, the first fret action and the neck relief, make sure they're the way we want them. Then we identify the limitations, which Colin has clearly found in this guitar anyway. Maybe some other little fuzzy bits here and there. We identify the limitations and then we level using my method, the curved file method, with the guitar fully strung. And the reason it's advantageous that the guitar is fully strung is two reasons. One is that the strings are on there and we can literally do that and stop as soon as we've cleared the highness of that fret, your highness. And the second advantage is that as it happens, having the guitar fully strung also includes some compression effects in the neck that aren't there when you take the strings off and you use this baby. You might get an absolute level with the strings off, with the neck absolutely flat, but when you restring it, you're putting the neck under a load which just slightly changes the position of the frets. Now it's not huge, it's only a few percent, but it's a bonus that to do it with the strings on this way happens to also do the leveling with the compression at play. I've said this millions of times, but if this is the first of my videos, I hope you understood that explanation. Now I'm not claiming that that percentage is so much better than using Crimson. I've got a huge amount of respect for Ben and all the people who make these things and use these things. I'm only saying, I hope you understand the reasoning why I use the other method, particularly in little marginal situations like this where you have what seems to be only 1 or 2 frets. It could be a problem, and helping you understand why I avoid trying to do spot leveling, which can be successful. You can get lucky, but you can also get very unlucky, and before you know it, you've really messed up. I avoid spot leveling, and I use what I've discovered to be an elegant method to achieve the freeing up the notes at the action that I have chosen for my customer or for me. All right. And of the 2 methods, then, that is a little bit less wasteful of fret metal than this, because this, whether you like it or not, this is leveling to an absolute or an arbitrary complete levelness, so you don't get any rocking. You don't use this and then go, well, it's reduced the rocking, I think I'll stop there, that's probably enough for the action. The idea of anyone who uses one of these continues until there's no rocking, and that is a certain amount of cost. Okay, long-winded explanation over, but you know, I don't want to. I'm not critical of that thing. That's how I started doing it, and it worked perfectly well. But if you're in a marginal situation where you want to, and actually, the truth is, you never want to take more metal from the frets than if you can help it. Actually, I'm just noticing, by the way, this is a custom cut nut, because I can see that this B string is slightly in the wrong place. As it happens, it's only about 3/4 of a millimeter, but it's a little bit in the wrong place. Anyway, so I suspect it's not factory made. It's very hard to do. So good on anyone who put this together. It's a good stab. It's also suggests to me it's been done after market, because it's surprisingly low first fret action, which is quite rare. It'll still be a bit above my target. Yeah, it's quite a bit. It's about 0.5, 0.6 in places. A little bit varied. So I'll take it down to my preferred action for this setting, but we know what we've got. I'll just note it on here. First fret is between 0.5 and 0.7 or 0.6ish at most, and then the third component that I would want to check and set is the amount of relief in the neck. Now, you've seen me doing this loads, and it's incredibly eyeball-y, and I guess that at about 0.2. Now, if you want to be one of these people who spends a while checking this with a what's it, you know the word I'm looking for, thingy, you can do it. You can block off the thingy with the thingy, hold down the first fret there with the capo, hold it down and fret here, and pick somewhere in between. Now, people go 8th fret, whatever, it's pick the middle point, and then you put this under, and you basically, it's hard to tell, but you're looking to see if it moves or if there's a gap underneath there. And okay, so that's actually kind of, technically speaking, that's probably a little more than I would normally go for. It's about 0.35, and I would probably aim for about 0.25. However, considerations at play. First of all, is it doesn't really matter what it's set at, whether it's dead flat or curvy, when I'm doing this fret leveling part, right? Because I adjust the tool to match. It could be like a banana, and I'll adjust the banana tool into a curve. It can be dead flat, and I'll flatten out the tool, and we get the same effect at the end, that the frets are relatively level relative to each other. So at this stage, it doesn't matter. It only really matters at the end stage, is how the player likes it. Now, in the case of this guitar, Colin sent me this, and he sent it to me as with a 0.35-ish, whatever it is, okay? And in fact, actually, down here it looks about, yeah, it's higher than I would normally go. Now, I can do one of two things. I can either adjust it now, well, sorry, let's rewind. He sent it to me with whatever it is. Now, it is what it is. It's what he's probably used to playing it. The question is, do I reduce it? And if so, why? Okay. If I reduce it, what happens? Well, the first thing that happens is I create, pound for pound, depending on the action here, I create a feeling of a lower action around the middle of the neck. That's the first tangible. It's not why I'd adjust it. The reason you'd adjust it, or the reason you have any relief, is to give the strings some room to spin, because the nature of these things is they spin a lot. You can see it when you look down on them. It all fuzzy and blurry, furry and bluzzy. And that's the string moving a lot in this middle point. So it kind of follows, well, it's not exactly middle to the neck, but anyway, somewhere around here. The idea is that the curvature of the neck allowing the neck to have some curvature at all provides a bit of room for the strings to spin. Now, if there's several, again, this is where variables come into effect. If the action is this tall, right, the strings were way up here, right, it doesn't matter that you created space there because the strings will never hit the fretboard. Okay, you can hit them as hard as you like. If you go for a low action, the strings are commensurately closer to the board, and suddenly the amount of room for this spinning, especially if you hit them hard, becomes critical. Equally, if you've got a low action and you happen to be a light player, you don't really make the strings spin much, and you can get away with a much flatter neck for the same pound for pound action because you don't hit them hard. But if you like a low action and a flat neck and you hit the strings hard, you're going to have to compromise somewhere. And the compromise is very often done by creating a little bit of curvature in the neck, just enough to allow the strings to play without too much notable or audible or tangible string slap. Now, quite often people, when they talk about the guitars, they talk about fret buzz, and actually what they can also mean is fret slap. And it can occur from like, for example, you're hearing a little bit of fret slap there. That's not fret buzz. There's actually quite a lot of clearance between this fretted note, the string, there's a lot of clearance between this string and the fret, or relatively quite a lot, and it's actually probably just buzzing somewhere here where it spins more than it's hitting that first fret, because the amount of movement just after the point where it's fretted is very small. Anyway, so so this isn't fretted, but we can still make it buzz or slap. Now, the flatter the neck would be, if I bend it back, the more it's going to buzz. Okay, so the question is, what do I do? Well, you take your customer's guitar, they've sent it with about 0.35, it's probably how they're used to it. Did Colin say to me specifically, I can't stand the curvature of the neck, it's driving me mad? No. What he wants is as low and as light and as buzz-free an action as possible. So typically, a guitar like this, what happens if I make the priority the neck curvature? Well, I can flatten this out a little bit, then it means I have to make sure that my frets are really level to avoid as much slap as possible, and certainly to avoid what we've got here, this choking out. That's a separate issue. But we will end up with a compromise. We can't have very low, dead flat, heavy hitting. You can't do it, all right? Unless you have high action, very flat neck, lots of heavy hitting, you can have that. So you've got to balance the things. And the question, I suppose, like I'm getting around to it, is, what is likely to be the customer's requirement? If you know explicitly, if you don't know explicitly, it's not something perhaps you talked about, then the thing to start with is the customer knows the feeling of the guitar like this. If you change it radically and go, look, I'm a what do you call it, shredder, and I've got this Les Paul, maybe not the best guitar for shredding on or whatever, but let's say I'm a shredder and I really want this to be as low as possible. Then okay, you might say my priority is a flat neck, in which case we're going to have to do a combination of slightly higher action and very careful, even more careful fret leveling to make this thing play. Okay, now we know that starting this job we've got a task on the fret leveling here, just to make a regular, fairly average amount of relief, decent action already set. To make that play the way we want, the leveling has become a priority, because I don't want to raise this any higher for Colin. He wants a guitar that feels low and plays nicely. Also a priority for this, first priority is the nut is not keeping tune. It's messing up the tuning. Second priority is you can't get the bends. So it's replacement or fix the nut first, fret level to free up these bends, given that this is a low action and a reasonable amount of neck relief as it stands, and flattening it isn't going to free that up. We've got an uneven problem. So first one, sort the nut, get rid of the, or level the frets until that note is freed up. Now the amazing thing is you can cure that by lifting this, right? But we know we don't want to go any higher. This is a pretty acceptable low action that we'd be wanting to aim for on this guitar. So we're counterproductive to raise this. Yeah, we clear the issue down here, but Colin gets back a guitar that doesn't feel like it's been done, right? And he won't be happy with it. So we know what the task is. In that, first priority, nut, tuning, stability, good first fret action. Second priority, fret leveling to free up this choking bit on the bends, because there's nobody who's going to have a guitar like this who doesn't want to bend notes like that. Third priority, then, attention to, well, get the neck as flat as possible because it feels nice, right? So we could either do that later or we could do that now. If that's our intention, well, we might as well put a little bit of a counter in it now, and then we'll have set two of the three things. That's already set. We can set a little bit of flatten out the neck a little bit now by tweaking the truss rod, and then we will just tidy up the first fret, the slots in the nut. And in this case, because we know we're going to replace it, we're really only doing it for height part of it. You know, I'm not that bothered right now that it may or may, if it keeps good tune or not, because we're not going to stay with it. I'm just bothered about getting the guitar into the geometrical state, if you like, ready for fret leveling, and it requires being happy with those three components: relief, first fret action, last fret action. That's why I deal with them in those ways. Now, of course, they're interrelated, right? Don't even think for a minute they're not. If I make an adjustment now to this, oh god, I lost one of my, that's dropped off. No, that's what I am missing. If I make an adjustment now to the, I can do it. Right, so we want to flatten it out a bit, right? So I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on the truss rod, turn it clockwise. I'm going to flatten this out a little bit and see where we get. Now, once I've done a tiny bit of flattening it out, I wouldn't be surprised if we find more fret problems emerging. But having got that right, because it's where we want it anyway, having flattened this out and having adjusted the slots here to the right height, then we'll know we're ready to go. But like I said, if I flatten this out, flatten the board out, so take the curvature out of it, then what will happen is that the action will feel a little bit lower here, and it will be fractionally lower at both of these places, but it will be very, very tiny. But as long as you know that it does have an interrelationship with it. Now, well, I'll just check and see if that made any effect. It might not. Sometimes it takes a long time. No, that's taken effect. That's pretty low. Now we might expect to hear more slap. We might expect to. Yeah, it's made a little impression. What's amazing is how much difference it makes into the feel of it. So we're going for a starting with a target flattish neck, as flat as possible. Not too much, no slap there, so that's okay. We're sticking with what it is there. Now I'm going to get my standard 0.3 on the nut slots, and I'm just going to use my, where's it gone? Am I looking at, this is metric, there it is. I'm going to draw a mark on this because I'm starting to lose track of which it is. That won't last very long, but you are the one. So we're going to just tidy up these, notwithstanding we're going to bin that nut and replace it with this adjustable one a bit later on. So to just get these right, I'm just going to hike these over the edge, and I'm going to start with a G. Now, the eagle eyes amongst you will go, ah yes, but even that's changing there. Yes, it is. Can't do it without moving them. I'm conscious that there is a small amount of there'll be a small amount of curvature flattening as we take a bit of the load off for this process, but it's only a small amount. Now, first thing I'm going to do with this one, because I know that this slot is deep and it's gripping the string too much anyway, just for the sake of this, even though we're probably going to replace it, I'm going to just widen it up a little bit with the V file, and that we're pretty much on the mark for height, but I just wanted to, for the purpose of this, just see if it frees up the tuning, stabilizes the tuning a bit. And then we do the next one. Again, this has been done pretty well, so this is on or about, so this is on or about the mark. Again, I'm going to just, while I'm doing this, I don't have to do this at this point because since it's going to be replaced anyway probably, it's kind of academic, but I'm just going to try and make it stay in tune a bit better for the time being anyway. It doesn't hurt. And then I'm just going to put this one on. And that one's quite high relatively speaking. Okay, so I'm going to both open this one out with the V notch, and then I'm going to use a gauged thingy to file, correct size file, to just get down to the right height, not far off. So I'm going to use the 12 on this one. Now you notice that 12 is bigger than the 10 that this is fitted with, and I always go oversized because to do otherwise will guarantee you sticky strings and or sticky slots. And the reason for that is that these are quite deep, these nuts, and it's almost impossible by hand to cut a dead straight slot, and to some degree the amount of wiggle that builds in while you're doing this, however little it is enough to cancel out the difference between your 10 gauge and your 12 slot, right? By the time that's curved a little bit, that room has been cancelled out by the walls of the curvature, if you think of it as a tube, right? And so you will very quickly find yourself with no inability to keep it in tune. Right, that's good. Now we drop off the bottom two and we'll go from the D outwards in this one, switching to my 32. Again, pretty good. Or again, just widen it. Now, reality is I'll probably end up now with a perfectly good working nut, and if so, I may choose not to do the replacement thing, because if it's not broke, don't fix it, you know. We'll see. My experiences over years has been that these bone nuts work beautifully if you get them right. So don't fix things that ain't broke. But it gives me an option, so I'm trying it out now. And that one's still a little bit high. Get close to the mark. I think it's, yeah, let's take this one down a little bit. I wimped out a little bit on this D. Let's do another little bit. I can feel it's tight, and this is why I suspect that the luthier who did this one previously used a 10 set for a 10 gauge of strings, which is possibly why this is now a little bit grippy. And you see that I'm opening up the slot above the base of the string to just reduce the likelihood of it catching or sticking. Hardly adjusts at all, that. Okay, so yeah, just time and experience. Now this one's already low cut, so I think I'm only going to at best get away with widening the slot if I can, and that's maybe the best improvement I get on this at the moment, just to don't want to go any lower. Working, it's a little bit sluggish compared to where I want it. And finally, the low E. Now this will have improved it already. This one's just a bit higher, and again, priority for the time being, just first off is just to widen it out so that it doesn't stick. Free movement of strings, one of the 4 freedoms of the the 4 freedoms of guitar setup. Bone dust. Okay. Okay, so there's the first bit done. I'm just going to get it in tune again. Got this little tuner. I I really don't heart this thing very much, I have to say. Maybe it's because the battery's so wimpish or something. The way of telling whether your slots are sticky or not is to tune it to where you think it's tuned and then pull it. And that's usually the caught up pressure discrepancy between the two sides of the nut unwinding and okay, that feels good, and that's with this slight reduction in the neck relief, so we flatten that out, almost gone. That's really low, I mean really flat. But again, we'll go, let me just close this, the rain out. We'll go with that as our start point. Okay, so after a lot of explaining, and of course it doesn't usually always take this long, but I'm doing a lot of explaining, we're at a place where I'm happy with the action set here already. This is as low as you're going to really get with a guitar like this. Target action, I would never go any lower. The only guitar I go lower on would be an SG. Action is set here. I've flattened the neck slightly and I've set the nut slots to as low as I want them. Now with that, and the tuning is pretty much to pitch, right? Now I'm in a place where I would bizarrely slack all the strings off for a minute, and I'm going to create a space to get to the frets, because then as a preparatory to fret leveling, I'm going to paint the frets with marker pen, and this is our guide, this is our invaluable means of knowing what's happening with the fret leveling tool. So there are a couple of little chips under these frets, which make me wonder whether this has already been refretted, this guitar, at the same time as it being nut upgraded. You never know. May not be, may just have been the way it is from the factory. So just marking all of these up, and then I'll retune it to pitch, and then we'll be ready. Now the nice thing about this all the way through is that, having kind of decided the three basic components of the playing action, the first fret action, the last fret action as I call it, and the neck relief, those three primary parts of the playing action, then every time we load the string up, the guitar with strings, and bring it to pitch, we will recreate the geometry we had before. Right, so just for stability's sake, I'll get all of these roughly to tune. Much easier than using that tuner. The absolute to pitch doesn't matter, it's just as long as it's approximately to the right tension. I mean, we're interested in pitch for the sake of the tension, is what I'm saying. Right, now I'm going to use this rod here. I sometimes use the other one, which is wider and stiffer, but I'm using this one because the other one doesn't return quite to flat, and this neck is now so close to flat that the relief profile is so close to flat that I need the sensitivity of this rod. Now I use this method, put these 3 little identical sized dome nuts down, and I use them as this simple, elegantly simple mathematical way of adjusting this truss rod until it's the same curve as the neck. Now this equally is almost completely flat, so I'm going to have to work with it completely flat because that's all there is, and it's touching all 3, so that's correct, but it's telling me the neck is effectively, to all intents and purposes, flat, which is very, very challenging for setting an action. So having done that, knowing that the truss rod with its self-adhesive sandpaper of 400 grit is actually the same curve profile now as the neck, I start to do some leveling, just basically using the tool under gravity. And what I would expect to find is, because it's flat, it should be pretty much touching all of the, nearly touching all of the frets, but I'm definitely expecting to find 10th fret cutting up a little bit more substantially than the others, and then so it is. So it's kind of, now it's doing it there, but it's going to be the bit at the middle that's the important bit, sorry, the bit at the middle around here that's the important bit, because that's the point where it chokes out when I bend the E string across. So we expect everything to play nicely, because it almost did before. We won't expect to hear any difference in the bend because we're not bending it across yet. Now I'm really seeing that differencing gap on this handmade luthier nut, and it's annoying me. But I don't blame the maker, it's very hard to do. Okay, so now I'm moving across to what I call the B track. Having done the E track and happy that everything plays cleanly, I've moved across to the B, and again I'm just going from side to side, following the radius of the things, and I'm seeing cutting. It's absolutely, without a doubt, the most cutting is happening on 10. So what's great about this method is that the results, the experimental results, confirm the hypothesis which practice told us. Now look at that. Oh, okay, that was that one was okay. Okay, now that's playing okay across the B, and it's choking when we get across to the G, which is where the problem was. So this is the critical track, and this one I'm going to recalibrate, having used the first one twice for boring reasons I won't go into. Now this one now is showing I need to curve it a little bit to match the neck relief, and it's absolutely common that the neck relief changes very slightly as we go. So having made the tiniest of adjustments, I'm now going to do the G track, and this is the one where you're going to hear how this method works compared to any other method. Okay, this is the critical track, the G track, where the E string being pushed is choking out. And the reason it's choking out is because A, the fret is slightly uneven, it's slightly high, and B, as you're pushing the string up the hill of the fret radius, you're anyway losing clearance that you would otherwise have on the preceding or the following fret, but more so. Now I can see this is cut more than any other fret, which is exactly what I'd expect. And if this method is working, we should start to hear an improvement. It's playing. Not perfect, but it's playing, it's clearing. So I'm going to recalibrate this G track again. Actually, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back a step. I'm going to calibrate for the B, and do the B and the G again. But it's working, so that's what you're hearing is the improvement. It wasn't playing at all, it was choking out totally when it got to that point, and now we've released it, and that's achieved by the very tiniest of modifications to the fret height, which was otherwise costing the clearance that required to make the note play. So you're talking such tiny clearances, it's almost ridiculous how it even works at all. But this small amount of clearance makes the difference. So I'm kind of focusing on this B track and then the G track, and once we got those two, really this thing will clear up, because the others are, they're okay, you don't bend across into them anyway, and the others will clean up. They're only just a little bit of residual buzzing, not choking out. So it's a really nice method, and like I said before, you know, its elegance is that we just stop at the point at which that note clears up for the action. Now what's interesting about it is it's because it's so precise. If I were to set this up playing at that lovely low action, and if Colin were to even do a quarter of a twist of the bridge post down here, he'd reintroduce the choke, because if you'd lowered it any more, then the clearance that I'd made would be reduced or disappear altogether, because I haven't, in the sake of preserving fret metal, I haven't lowered for all actions. I've lowered to make the action I've chosen to play. It's really important to remember that. So, you know, I haven't done a fret leveling so you can crank the action down to 0. I've done it to make it play at a, what I know is the lowest reasonable and feasible action that this kind of guitar will play at, given the neck radius and given the kind of music that people tend to want to play on this. So it is it's not going to allow you to lower more than this, but this is a very low action. Now where are we? Let's just mark the point here. Ugh, I never do it. Okay, now we're across practically into the D track. So we've cleared most of the way. Now I'm going to do the D track, which could be the last. I always think the G, but sometimes the D is the sort of last. It's on the crest of the hill, and we should, once we get that right, we should know whether or not we can clear these notes up completely. Now the thing about, I think I hinted a minute ago, the thing about bends is that they are very constrained by the geometry of the neck, which means the tighter the radius, the quicker the clearance reduces as you push the string up the hill in your bend, particularly if you're talking about a treble string pushing upwards to the middle of the neck or beyond. And certainly if you go over the other side, you're in negative kind of geometry. It's kind of, it makes sense really if you think about the three-dimensional geometry of the thing. If you were to look at the guitar end on, you've got a radius like that, and what you're doing is you're pushing, there's your radius, you're pushing a string from here vertically up the hill, but its anchor points are down there and down there. Alright, and the further you push it to a point where it's on, the further up the hill you push it, the more clearance or the more you're disappearing the clearance needed. And if you push it over the hill, then you've got a kind of almost a negative thing where it's got to clear the top of the hill and anyway down the other side. So it's quite tricky with tight radii, particularly 9.5s and 7 1/4 are very difficult to play bends on a low action. Oh, hello, wind. Right, where were we? Okay, we're still choking as we go over to here. Definitely, that's in the kind of in the A and the E zone. So may have to go back. Now the other thing about this is we're working with a flat flat neck at this point that may be technically fractionally improved by curving it, because the next one then curves away downwards, but it's marginal. Nearly there. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go back over it. So again, this is where the experience has to come in, because you're thinking to yourself, how much do I do? Let me shut this door. It's right at that place. The rim on Tuesday is out there. Let's have a bit of warmth too. Yeah, this is where experience comes in. So you're saying, where do I stop? How much do I do? And the answer is, your experience will tell you that you can keep going. You can go a little bit further. If you look at the physical effects of this, it's very marginal. We've hit all the tops of the frets because the neck is flat to begin with, so we're seeing a cutting up effect on all parts of the neck, but it's not taking a lot. It just means that it's flat and it's kissing everything pretty quickly, which is fine. And the real issue is I stop when I think I'm taking too much metal off to continue. Now, funnily enough, you have to go a very long way with this method, including the 400 grit that's on here. You have to go a very long way before this approaches even 1 or 2 passes of the traditional fret leveling file. Okay, I'm going to really focus on this because this is a problematic fret, this number 10. I mean, it's not problematic only in the sense of the bends at that action. It plays all the notes fine. And ultimately, if you try this and you find that you get to a point where you just cannot, at the action that's chosen, you cannot free up that tone and a half or 2-tone bend or whatever you're aiming for, then there is a point where you just have to compromise and make a very minor tweak to the playing action, and a tiny adjustment of the bridge action will make a huge difference in terms of the note playing. But you know, we're trying to do the best we can for the action at the lowest possible. You know, so we don't want to have to compromise. Unless I reach a point here where I go, right, that's enough leveling, I'm now going to compromise because I don't want to level any further than this. I'm not at that place yet. And like I say, you can go a surprisingly long way before you actually take a lot off the frets. I suppose a general piece of advice for anyone trying this method is it always looks worse than it is. When you first do it, you'll back off in horror thinking, oh no, I've completely, you know, murdered my frets. And if you're using 400 grit or thereabouts, you have say you've got a long way to go. Rule number 1 is it always looks worse than it is, and rule number 2 is you have a long way to go with that sort of grit to really over level. So here I am, kind of really thinking about this number 10 fret. I want this evened out. I want it to play on the big bend, please. Now the complicating thing about fret work like this is that sometimes you find a single fret in a series of frets that's, there you go, nearly there, so nearly there. I'm going to do a fraction more on the B and the G again, and then I'm moving on. Okay. Yeah. So occasionally on a fret leveling, you can find the guitar with, for one reason or another, a very slightly sunken fret. Now you would never see it with your eye. In fact, you probably won't even notice it until you come to this point where you're thinking, why can't I get this note to play? It's quite an extreme ask. You've got a very low action, you've got a flat neck, and you are getting all the notes playing cleanly. You're just not getting big bends on a particular note, and it's at that point you can start to realize that you've got a low fret in front of the one you're think you've got the problem with. And so the one you think is high is not so much high, but the one back from it is actually, for some reason, lower than you would imagine. Now, I've had that happen on some guitars, and it's turned out to be because either the fret's been hammered in a little harder and it's actually compressed the wood, or it's on a little bump in the neck over time and it's just kind of slightly uneven around that fret or one or two frets. Whatever the reason can be, or somebody even can sometimes put in a replacement fret that's lower than the others and didn't tell you, or you never found out, or whatever. Whatever the reason is, you have to kind of spot that as early as you can, because the danger would be that you kind of crank onwards to a point where you've half killed your frets to bottom out this strange rogue low fret. And I've said many times on these videos, I haven't quite yet worked out a surefire way of knowing when that is, to avoid any costly overwork, because it seems to only show itself up later on, and that's really sort of annoying. Now this is cool. I'm looking at my poor cut thumb. I'm looking at this and I'm quite happy with how this is shaping up now, and I think we're pretty much there. Now that I'm happy with. It's got to where I want, and it's got the tiniest whiff of zzz as we bend up, and that to me is not enough to chase any more fret leveling on it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that for a combination of two things. One is the sanding out process, which is going to take a very small amount more off the frets anyway, which may well iron that out. And the second part is I'm at the point now where if I think that's a problem I want to address, I'll address it with, you know, an 1/8 or 1/10 of a turn on the action, and you won't even, technically you won't even notice it as far as the setting is concerned. It won't feel any different, but it will be just enough. So we are working to that closer a threshold rate. It's incredibly fine. I mean, it is anyway on any guitar, but by the time you get to this sort of fine tuning of the low playing actions. Now the thing about that is, of course, it's a sort of danger a little bit, is you can get a very low playing action like this and then send it to somebody in a different environment, and a couple of days in their environment can change the neck relief or the way the frets are sitting. There's just climactic differences and weird things can happen. But because the clearances are so minuscule, a little bit of atmospheric or climatic change can suddenly result in this 1/1000th of a whatever being clearance disappearing, and then suddenly somebody's got fret buzz. So it's one of those things I kind of have to warn against, but I have to be conscious that if that does happen, and somebody may, I can't remember the last time it did happen, but you know, there is a possibility that somebody comes back to me and says, you know, that lovely low action, well, it's buzzing, and it could be that you've literally got 10-20% more relative humidity or something, you know, that I can't account for. And it is just the bane of low actions. The lower they are, the less tolerant they are of changes in climate and the way the wood bends. Now if I just double check, just to reconfirm what I'm looking at here. Okay, well of course I'm now having changed the actual action of this, and thanks to flattening the neck out, what I've been working at, I've typically forgotten that it's reduced the last fret action slightly because I flattened the neck out a fair bit. So I've got actually far more leeway than I thought. So having levelled to quite a precise point, now this has got a locking thing on it, hasn't it? That's right. And what I don't know is this a lock to stop it turning, or is it a lock to stop it falling off? It's usually a lock on there, so maybe it's a lock to stop it turning. I think that's what Colin said. Can I reach it with this thing? Probably. Am I? Is it the right one? No, it's not. Is it? Yes, it is. Okay. It's not on anyway, whatever it's doing. It's not holding anything in place, so I will not worry about it just for now. Okay, so now I can afford a small upwards tweak of this to there, and a small upward tweak of this to there. Double check. I think what you'll find then, once we've got it right dialed on the mark, again 1.1 down to, I have to go back down on that one to 1.6, but we'll go down to 1.5. Yay! Perfect. So that little bit of extra leeway afforded to me by the flattening of the neck, which changed. That's how tiny, and that's how much little adjustments make a big difference. That little bit of flattening changed or just tweaked the final last fret action to a point where it had gone down to what was technically, well, it would be an unattainable last fret action. These things are weird. Is that even working? One sec. It is the right size, but how weird. That cannot be. You cannot be serious. Yeah. So it gave me back. Point being is it gave me back a little bit more room than I thought I had, which was cool. Right, that's locked. And well, it's tight, let's put it that way. Whatever it does to it, that isn't going anywhere until I can get it in there. Yeah, so that was really good. It just gave me back a little bit of room, and that tiny, as I was saying before, that tiny bit of raise on the action resulted in more than enough clearance to clear those final zings out. So now we've got level frets, a low action, and we're ready to polish them out, or re-crown them I should say, and then polish them out. But once the strings are off and I've done the polishing, then we're in the zone of changing the pickups out as well. And this will theoretically, if that's tightened up, that will stay in the same place. It's not a problem with this setup anyway. The way I do it is that this can come off, you can take it all off, and you put this back on, and then you just raise it again or set it to where you had it before, and the action will play because you've leveled it for that action. That's the good thing about it. So, okay, so the first next part, I'm going to take a break shortly, but first next part is we go back and we thingy out the thingy. We paint out the frets again. And this next part of the process is, since we've done some leveling and the frets are a little bit flat on top in certain places, we now get a reprofiling tool, and we basically take off, or reshape the frets is the best way to put it, I think, using what's there. So we kind of take the existing fret and we make from it a new, we reclaim the arch shape of the fret, but we do it without lowering the fret anymore, and that's a really important part. So it's a kind of, if you think of the flat spot being our new top of the fret, and then we kind of we shave away, or we file away the shoulders either side of that, until what we're left with is a nice arched looking fret within the same set of material that we had, and the same the top is the same height as when we leveled, and that's the important bit. Okay, so get that on there, get these on there. It's pretty gusty out there. It's an amazingly wintry day all of a sudden, but that's winter. I mean, we are in November, so I'm not complaining exactly. Why am I doing this back up? Sorry, brain off. I need to take these off completely now. I've done that. Sorry, not even thinking. We just need to use the file on the frets, he said, going off on tangents. So off you come, all of you. Oh, really, what was going on? What was I thinking? Come on. So these can come off as sacrificial strings to fight another day. Always useful to have a sort of full set of any type of guitar strings. Now while this is all off, I'll give this guitar a good clean as well. So having got this wonderful new camera sort of gripper thing, I've ended up doing the same sort of camera angle all the time, because it sort of just ends up working and being a bit trouble free, which is cool. Okay, so I can take this off for a second. Now this, I'm thinking, yep, that will stay in place. I can dust around it. Okay, so for these are medium sized frets. I'm going to use the medium edge of this here thing, and I'm going to now just use it to level out or remove the shoulders of any flat spots that we've created in the leveling process. And it's very effective, and it's quite quick. So you see quite quickly where it needs work, and the aim is to leave the thinnest possible line of black marker across the top. So it's kind of rounding the frets and leaving that untouched on top is the aim of it. And if we do leave that largely untouched, that little thin pencil moustache of marker pen, it means we've reshaped the frets, but we haven't reduced the relative height of the tops, which is obviously the aim. Now I'm expecting to find this one here, number 10, take a bit longer, because it will have been levelled out a bit more than everything else. And actually it's not that bad. So pound for pound, the amount I've taken off overall is always dictated, or is always indicated by the amount of time I have to use this tool on any particular fret. And I can say that if that was the most levelled fret in the set, actually that was pretty quick treatment. So it tells me that despite lots of dust, or a fair bit of dust, it tells me that actually that isn't really a lot of fret metal overall, because it's a quick finish process with this file. So it's not bad. Okay, so pretty much there. You can see it's a fairly quick process. As I say, if I'd have taken a lot of actual metal off, the process would have taken a bit longer. You can do it with a 3-corner file, and my ebook was written from the point of view of showing how to do that, so that not because I recommend anyone spends a lot of time doing it. It's about three or four times slower than that. So if that took 2 minutes, it might take you 10 minutes, but it's not a huge amount. But the reason I featured that in the ebook is the point of the ebook was to show people how to do exactly the same setups as I do with tools costing virtually nothing. And you can see that the banana, I call it, the fret leveling tool itself, actually costs nothing. If you've got an old neck lying around, you can get hold of truss rod from inside of that for nothing, and that's where in fact this one came from. This began life as a knackered Squire Affinity neck. I bought one or two along the way, some cheap ones, just to try out different things, but you know, if you do it yourself, it can cost you virtually nothing. So rather than, you know, $150 file plus, you know, expensive crowning files and expensive nut slot cutting files and all the rest of the stuff, the ebook was deliberately to show how to do it with tools costing next to nothing, which is why it was the way it was. Right, I'm going to go inside and get a bit of a clean up, and also if I can find the brush, I'm going to just brush off the bulk of the dust of this. Now at this point I know that I've got the frets the way I want them. I only need to polish them out, which is boring and time consuming. I've got to change the pickups out and give everything a clean up, and then decide whether I'm going to replace this nut, but I don't have to make that decision right now. So I'll see you shortly after a cup of tea. Doing some polishing out, sanding out to the sounds of Ian Jury live at Hammersmith Odeon or somewhere like that, 1977-ish. I don't know whether this will get copyright infringement, but anyway, just give you a quick peek into what I do when the camera's off, if you get what I mean. It's not off right now. But this is a cool thing about the old mobile phones, being able to play YouTube videos via Wi-Fi in the shed through your speakers while you're working. Not bad. Hit me with your rhythm stick. I keep thinking he's over there behind me, but he's down here on this thing. Oh, actually, I think he's probably in Germany, judging by the silly German language. Clever Trevor. Oh, this is probably... It's probably bleeping and blurping all over the camera at the moment, so I won't stay on long, and then on top of that I'll probably get Google's little robots going, "You have used in an unauthorised fashion works belonging to the estate of the late Mr. Ian Jury." So, anyway, I just wanted to sort of show you what it goes like in here when I'm not on camera. I'll see you in a bit when I'm done, and I'll show you, come back in a minute when I'm doing the wiring, the refitting new pickups. What a shame, what a bleeding shame, what a waste. Da, 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 da. What a waste. That was the old Ian Jury, that was. Just listening to a very rude one of his songs, so I won't tell you what it was about. I've forgotten how rude it was. Anyhow, here we go. The polishing of the frets has been done. Now we are in the land of rewiring. No, just changing the pickups is the way we want to put it. So it'll be interesting to see what's in here already, what sort of make they are, or if any identifying features. Okay, well, we have what is known as the small mini pots thing going on in here, and little standardized potentiometers. No, yes, mini pots and bird's nest. Right, so to do this, it's not going to be very good video, I can promise you. It never is at the electronics stage of things. People say, "Can you show us a close-up?" I do suppose I've got a camera there that gets in closer, but even still, they ain't fantastic. No, they ain't. Right, so I've got to track things down a minute and see what we got, what's where. I'm just going to put a tiny little mark on these so I can see what I'm doing. Alright, so we have, how does this all work? Blimey, that's all a bit clutterified. What we got here? Crikey. Do I know what's going on here? Probably need my other glasses. So really it's not hugely edificacious for you guys. I've got to try and work out what's going on in this pocket first and foremost. So we have what you would think was the red thing comes in there. That looks like it goes to there. You'd think the black one in there goes to there. That goes to there. And then that, does that cut across to there? It does. Where does that go? That goes to the tone. Yeah, you'd expect that. Yeah, in and out to the tone. And so the red one, that's what you'd expect. Nothing too complicated, nothing too unusual. So the red one is in the neck, and the black one is the bridge. Okay. Yeah, right. So, stage one, in which Doris gets her oats. That was a Beatles quote reference. Anyway, so stage one, I'm just going to snip this here. We have neck, pick up. Everyone see that Juggernaut movie? And then here we have bridge, pick up. Now we have it. Neck pickup and bridge pickup severed. Here comes the fun, little darling. Neck pickup, bridge pickup have been disconnected. Come on. Thank you. Quite short, those little screws. Okay. Bridge. Bridge is BH. BHC. Who's that then? Who's that then? Okay, let's go bridge, let's go neck. Bridge, neck, same size screws. Okay. Here comes the neck. Now let's put this off to one side. This is all good, it's shielded and stuff, which is nice. Stay. Now we've got to change these fellas out. Actually, I don't really need those for that. I'm going to change these out in terms of switching out 4-wire neck. 4-wire neck for the bridge. Yeah. Simple, fairly simple operation. Blues Engine from IronGear, the fastest delivery known to mankind, personkind. I ordered this about, I don't know, 11 o'clock, no, midday, 1 o'clock, something like that, yesterday, and they were here by 10 o'clock this morning. How on earth they managed to do that, I don't know. So on the IronGears, we have, I've forgotten which is the, oh blimey, which is the pair, the what told me here. On the iron gears, the red is the hot, the black and the bare is the ground, of course, and the green and the white is the pair. What did we say? Red. Yeah, red. Okay. Red's the business. Okay. Just join these two together since they are going to common, or they're going to an earth together. That's our setup. Pretty, aren't they? IronGear Blues Engine, bridge position. Yeah, very good. Okay, so bridge position. Yep. Thank you. Right, let's get this. Get that in there. Not there. Not that. Not these. Not those. Not those. Quite handsome. Keep those for another day. Well, keep those in there. I mean, that to that side. This to here. Okay. Very nice. Bridge. I always find this a very bizarre, crude, slightly clumsy way of doing things. Just holding it there and hoping you get it to push into a little waxy hole in the metal. Works, but it just seems oh so unscientific. Yeah, there we go. There's the bridge. Okay, the bridge. The bridge. Put in there. You. I'm going to take a picture so I can remember what these are. BH. Okay, that's of interest. Come along. BH. Okay, thank you. So is it one of those Korean made things? Who knows? More than likely Chinese, full stop. Okay. Bridge. Neck. Now the business here with the nut change will have to be left till tomorrow anyway, because it won't be set even if I wanted to change it over. But the point is, the nut, now that I've done the setup, the nut would be a direct swap out, or a swap, fairly simple swap out, because the setup part is already done, so it's not an issue. Let's put that together like that. Stay there. Yeah, so we'll just leave it, but we can get the whole setup done today and then see how it plays and then kind of worry about the change out. Now, I thought while I'm at it, as we've got some various different capacitors here, I'm going to fit some orange drops to this and see how it sounds afterwards. Okay, we're going to go for the neck here. So we'll have a listen and see what the tone is like. Failing that, I've got some bog standard. Oh, hang on, wait a minute, let me just think. Oh, wait a minute, I have a feeling. Hold on. through. Just thinking green capacitors. That was a bit reluctant, that one. Just thinking about the colour of those capacitors, they look to me like the green 473s, which would be a wrong, which might, I mean, green doesn't mean 473, but I'm just wondering actually whether or not they are, because if they are, they're the wrong, they'll be taking too much treble off, which could be why it sounds muddy. I mean, for all I know, it could be a feature of that particular instrument. That might be all the rage for it, who knows. Right, there's my groovy thingy. Let's have a look now, let's have a close look. Okay, without taking these off, I can't tell. Alright, they are green. They do look, no, they're 220s. It's okay. Still, we'll try them on the drop. Now this is interesting because these are, oh god, my thumb is split, sourced from China. So these I'm prepared to see whether these are any good or not. They're quite big. If they're not, then we'll go back to a different kind, but since we're here, there's no harm in doing having a try. So, nice super duper thingy, so soldering iron in place. I get you as close as I can from here, which isn't very close. Oh, I'm so sorry. I can possibly find you somewhere else. No, you can't really see. It's just, it's not very good, is it? I'll tell you what. Let's give you a chance. Sorry. I mean, this isn't exactly the one with a better focus, but you're still pretty close. Right, let me get my various bits of kit ready for the soldering world. I don't need any extra wires, I don't think. I think I'm all good in that department. There's my soldering iron stand. Well, I don't exactly need it because it's there. Here's my little thing there. Okay, you're not getting dazzled too much because you're not looking at the light, which is okay. I am looking down there. Right, so first of all, festival, let's just put all this through. But before I do that, just give this a little clean here, because we won't get up that close and personal to these edges again. So I can give it as much of a... It's amazing how many little scratches this stuff picks up. It's absolutely incredible under the light. You can really see it. What I can do is I can give it a little go with some scratch remover, very faint scratch remover stuff. Very faint, very light. Number two. See how it fares with that. When I'm at it. It is quite incredible. I mean, under a bright light, it's never, you know, it always shows up the scratches you've got in the finish. This stuff is really good usually. I'll worry about, I'll probably do the rest of it in a minute, but let's just have a look at this area down in here. Okay, let's use a bit of this. Followed by this. It's amazingly, it's just incredibly susceptible to scratches of any kind, even breathing on it, but yeah, that's alright. It's pretty. So we'll give it a go around here when all is done. Okay, so we have, let's just begin with the neck pickup. Let's try and bend this into some sort of workable shape. Sorry, you can't see much going on, I don't think. But there we go. Right. Neck is grey. We'll remember that, won't we? Neck is grey. Neck is grey. No, don't drop onto the floor. Be interesting to hear those orange dots. The interesting thing is that I have it on very good authority that frankly a capacitor is a capacitor. So long as it actually works, then there is no tonal or substantial difference between these expensive branded things and the little polyester things. And of course people will, people argue, like many things, tone word argument and so on and so on. Oh, my thumb. People argue, that they can hear wonderful, warm, fluty, mellow tones, difference and all that. But the experts in electronics who I chat to say that it's pretty much, it is a capacitor that either does what it does at the rated value or it doesn't. And maybe, just maybe, there might be some difference between one that's a paper and oil one versus a polyester one, but I'm not even sure that some electronics people even believe there's that much of a difference, tangible difference or appreciable difference between those even. So I think it can get a little bit on the nerdy side. Like all good dogmas, there are people who will fight furiously arguing these things are appreciable differences. Well, we shall see. Come on, where's your wheel? There you are. Okay, so first of all, I'm obviously placing the pickups in situ, and then we'll go around the back and hook them up and change the capacitors over. Now, as I say, if the capacitors don't work or some bizarre unlikely thing like that, then of course we can replace them again. Now, the soldering iron should be heated up by now. You've got a bird's eye view, and here, what did I say? I've forgotten what I said. Bridge was what? I do this every single time. What colour did I say bridge was? I can't rewind, can I? So I'm just going to have to look. Holy. I don't know why this doesn't occur to me to just write this down. I only have to write one thing down. It's not exactly that complex. Bridge is black. Okay, so we now no, bridge is black. Thank you very much. Bridge is black. I want my baby back. Oh. Don't trust it. You see, it's too much hassle if you get it wrong and your memory is misleading you. So it's just worth doing that double take to check. Okay, black. Bridge is black. Bridge is black. So that's going to go there. So we've got a lot of excess. If it was my guitar, I'd snip all that stuff off because I really can't be doing with tons of stuff I don't need. However, it ain't heavy. It's my brother. So we've got these two grounds that have got to go together. We need to just extend this one a bit, just to make it wrappable around the other one, because they're not quite anywhere near the same length. Yeah, speaking of kind of obsessive OCD, making sure of something, I was packing a guitar for Mike in Switzerland, my custom MG1 as I call it, the Morris Guitar 1. I was packing that the other day, and I packed it twice in the end. I'll tell you why in a minute. But the first time I packed it, I had Mike's guitar, the MG1, in a Gibson soft case, a black Gibson gig case, you know, those nice soft fur-lined bags. Anyway, so I had it in one of those, and I had Mike's MG1 guitar in one of those, leaned up against my sofa, and I had my own MG, which is another version of the same guitar, or very similar, you know, my prototype, I suppose you could call it, of that same guitar, was sitting in identical bag leaning up against the sofa. And of course, so you've got two bags identical, two guitars very, very similar in size and everything else, and so you can guess, you can imagine that I had to look in the bag 3 times in a row to make certain that the one I was packing was in fact Mike's and not mine, and literally did it 3 times. I couldn't trust myself to not put mine in there. Just, you know, I couldn't imagine disappointing him, finding not his turn up but mine. Although mine's an excellent guitar, but it's not the one that didn't have all the lovely figured wood top. Anyway, so that's going to sit there, which means I don't have to clamber over the top of the guitar to reach the soldering zone. Okay, next bit, we know that black is bridge, remember? Bridge is black. So the first one is we're going to unhinge. I'm just going to use a little bit of masking tape in a minute. I'm going to unhinge the bridge cut-offs, and then we can pull them out and clean up the what's it, hopefully. The lug. It is very small because it's a miniature pot, so everything gets a bit tiny in here. There's the hot lead. You don't have to worry about the ground, although what I might do is just try and put a little bit more solder on the top of the pot where this is going to connect the ground. Just ease things along. Now, this is the fun bit. I've got to get the red lead here through the same lug as the jumper for the tone pot goes in. Now normally I would probably pull both out and clean everything up, but it's probably going to be easier to try and push this through and then reinforce the joint Go away, mosquito. Now this is actually quite a tricky angle to get in at, so I'm going to see what can I see of what's going on. Right, that goes in there. Actually, this isn't going to be easy to do at all. It's always a good one to redo, you know, if you have to. Just take it out, clear a path, get your solder sucker. Sorry if I'm in your way now. I am, aren't I? I can't do much about it. Get the solder sucker in there, clearing, jeez, I've burnt myself, clearing all the other things out of the way. Get yourself a clean hole to work through. You put your soldering iron safely down on the table in its little stand, which is a really crap setup. Right, now we've got, clean that off, we've got this little fella in here, can come back through the hole, which I can now see, and this little red chap here can go into the same hole as well, and we've got both of them coming through. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this one through with my robotic extra arm. It's like watching that THX1138 sci-fi movie. I'm manipulating radioactive isotopes in a controlled lab environment. Okay, now here comes, it doesn't come the next one. Get through under there, it goes underneath, that's fine. Try and pull it up a bit. Breathe out, doctor. Thank you, that'll do. Okay. Yeah. Take the bendy. Oh, I've got this nice stuff, haven't I? Have I used this one yet? Thank you, Ricard. Don't know what this stuff is from China, but it don't half make your soldering iron look clean and lovely. I like the sizzle too, and it's got loads of lovely little Chinese words all over it, and pictures, and you know, kanji. No, that's Japanese, isn't it? You know what I mean. Script. Chinese form script. Alright, get in there, get in there. See, now that bottom one has gone for a little walk. Pushed back when I didn't want it to, so now I'm going to have to eat this again, push it through. It's through. It is on. Right. Next, I'll hook over the shared earths into this spot here. Put that on there, hold it down, change hands, let go. Okay, is that, you know what, no, silly. Further through, come on, lift it off, go further down. So where's that thing of, let's get it as far on as possible so there's no chance of the ground doubling back and accidentally touching the live lug. Alright, done. Clean the tip, let go of the thing. We are connected in the bridge department. Now, you probably guessed that in order to do any wiring I have to talk to myself a lot. Just keeps me sane, really. Would you believe it? Let's try and, can I just stick, will you stay there out of the way? Will you? Oh my lordy, look at this little spider's nest. It's so easy to imagine this coming untangled. That's a, where did that go? That goes out to the, I don't even know where that goes. So we've got the red lead here, which is kind of in a funny place. Right, and then we just need to hoik that out, clean the connection up. as you can see, I think I might have to do something with some tape to try and keep a few things a bit out of the way. It's not so bad. You can't afford to melt anything in this process. It's all too likely to happen. Okay, now I'm going to try and, there's a couple of thoughts on this. You can try and loosen this and then pull back. Now I'm having to go left-handed here with the soldering iron, which is a really relatively risky thing to do. So I can try and heat this and then pull this little, see, that's no good, let's strip the wire. You can say you could try and pull backwards and pull out the lead, the hot wire, but what I've got now is just a bizarre little mess. So now, this is way too long anyway. Okay, right, so here we go. This suddenly now has to take a radical course of action. I'm going to disconnect this, take this out, clean it up. I should have done this with the other one probably, would have made life so much simpler. Shorten the darn thing, i.e. get rid of all the totally unnecessary extra material. Give myself a clean start and then work with the new lead from the new hot from the pickup. Now with that we leave a bit of a straggly earth wire, kind of a little bit of extra earth cable hanging off the top of the pot, but really it's not important. What we're doing is we're just making sure of the best possible connection, which will be this. Now let me bring in my friend the useless set of arms. I'm sorry, I'm insulting it when I really need it. Put it over there, get me the little there, give me the bit of this, get me a bit of that to tin this up first. Tinned, thank you, roughly, and tinned. Right, there's tinned, clean tip, plonk thing on the floor. Now that means I now have to continue to pull out this straggling bit of gunge and clean the lug if I can. Again, avoiding ruining surrounding wires. That's that. Prepare the sucker, clean the hool, put down the soldering iron, put down, now this is reaching through, is going to be a bit of a pain in the what's it. Oh, that hasn't cleaned it out, sorry, try that again. Got most of it but not all of it. So the problem here is I've got a bit of an odd angle on this. Let's try this. Yep, got a hole I can go through. So first one through there like that. Pull up with this little bit of overhang. Oh god, it's so bright and then it's suddenly so dark. It's like been working on an asteroid in the sun's shadow. Right, so there's the first one. Here is our secondary one. And here is our temporary holder out of the way of thing. So these two little beauties have got to get in through the same hole. Look at how untidy this is. I mean, how much extra goo there is. Okay, oh, that doesn't want to even stay down there. Why should it? Pop up. Hold it in there. Get the little blue pliers. Yank it upwards. Still doesn't want to stay there. Yank it back some more. Bend it. Bend it, straighten it. No, was it? Any way you want it. Yet again, carefully try and hook this gunge out of the way whilst retaining access to both of them thingies. And this one's now sticking in the way of threatening to ground out on the centre lug. Just want it roughly out of the way so I can make a bit of a solder joint and then run for the hills. How's it looking from where you are? See why I don't normally film this. Now I'm going to get down. Oh, Lords. Precaution. Pull up. Pull up. Anyone recognise the flight simulator references? Caution. Pull up. Okay. Now in we. Oh Lords. I can't get in here no more. This is a straggly old bit of whatnot. In you go. See if I can just remove some of the excess dangling bits. 2 hands. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. No, there's a bit more hot wire sticking out than I would like, but it should be nonetheless safely out of the way of any grounding influences. Now this is where this gets difficult. So in both these cases, no, in this case now I've got to shenanigans. Oh, I didn't take that one off, did I? So I've only got one of these two. Right, so I've got 2 sets of watsits to get to the grounding at the top of the pot, which is a bit of a pain now because this thing is now travelling through a massive, oh God, a forest of wires to get anywhere near the top of the thing. I'm going to have to do this one at a time, frankly. I'd love to in an ideal world I'd love to be able to do both together, but there are times where you just have to you have to accept you just can't do it. Do me a favour, just stay out of the way for a minute if you can. Sorry hands. Oh, this is no good. Sorry, you have to step back a minute. Right, you go on there. You get some glue on there. You keep away from that wire. Keep away from that wire, I told you. You go down and stick there. Right, that's one grounded. It's such an untidy little space. I never thought I would have got prissy about that. Once upon a time, if I could even make the thing play, I considered it a signal achievement. So now I'm going to put a little bit more. Oh heck, there's not a lot of room here. Put a bit more on top of here if I can even get anywhere near it. Grab this, come over the top of all of this, and then get out of the way. Oh my God, this is hard work. Okay, get on there, stay on there. Thank you. Right. Those things are all where they ought to be. But if I were starting again, it wouldn't look like this. I promise you. It's just too much excess wire, and you end up with it in the way of everything you're trying to do. So, you know, to even get to any of these capacitors, it's just a massive kerflannel. Now, the question here is, what 22s have I got other than this? I've got oil and paper. No, they're 47s, aren't they, mostly? Okay, well, just in case, I'm going to... Oh, wait a minute. Let's just do something a minute. Let's just do something. So, a quick listen. I've got no strings on. Oh. Yonks. Okay. Alright, well, let's carefully remove this ground and this capacitor. Now this is quite tricky because this iron for some reason is not quite as good as transferring great lumps of heat as the other one. So if I were to snip that from there, and then I can ease it out. There, that's one. So we go in, one there. We'll have a listen, and if they don't sound any good, the beauty is we will remove them and replace them with the original ones, or I'll find some others. I actually might have a couple of expensive ones of these, but I really wanted to try this and see what actually, what it comes to, because I like to find out firsthand, and if they sound as good as anything else, then why bother spending £5 a time buying them from the UK when you can get them and they function just as well from far away. They're just big, slightly. The other thing, I found the same has occurred with a bunch of those oil and paper, amazing Russian things, and some of those really are enormous, but they're fantastic looking. Can't fault them visually. Okay, right, let's try and do the top bit first. Which is not necessarily going to be easy. Add a bit of extra. See if we can get them to join up. Excuse me. Okay, top part engaged. Bring in the bottom part to a close proximity. Well, it's big. Stop bleeping at my phone. Where did that go? I forgot where I put it. It's official, I've lost it. Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, can't get simpler than that really. Great big orange, easy to spot thing. Fold this over and tuck it in here as well. Will it stay down please? Thank you. And then we'll take off this little one. Same thing here, it's just easier to bite it off. Now it's in the way, because there's always something in the way. Something with a hook on the end, please. It's not that then, is it? See, that's quite useful. Keep that one out. Here's one more now. Here's one with a hook on the end. That's what I need. Thank you. Right. Snip, thank you. Remove, thank you. Another green one. Orange one. Short. Half long. Down. Ouch. Down, out. Yeah, something like that. All right, clean Clean up the lug. Thank you. I have the discipline to put down that soldering iron every time it's not in use. Keep it safely out of the way. Big block of solder. There you go, governor. Connect it with the other one, please. Okay. Followed by a little joining up down at the base of a capacitor. Job done. Okay, that is the wiring. No, what did I do with that? There's my glasses. Okay, so I'm just looking at these. Are these spinning? They seem to be pushed round into a corner a bit. And they're okay, but they're not far off. Right, let's just put the lid back on here for now. Any problems, of course, we'll be back in there. Let's turn the soldering iron off. 6th of June in 2018, this was inspected. Now it's been inspected again. Okay, what I'll do now is I'm just going to push this, hang this up, and well, maybe before I hang it up, let's do one quick, ow, my split thumb, test the pickups briefly, just make sure everything's working the way it should. Come on, get caught under there. Okay, so well, that's not what we want, but lots of trouble, too much trouble, too much of that. Why is it with all that on it? Right, good. So they're working, everything's working as it should on the surface. What we won't know is how they sound until we get further on into it. Let me just put this out of the way so I can tidy up. I will have a look when I'm here. We'll dig a couple, I think I've got a couple of the expensive orange droops. Yeah, we'll keep those to one side. We'll see how they sound. So if there's no problem, then I'm happy to use the Chinese sourced ones. And then the question of whether anything is actually made by a company called Sprague could be argued to be debatable. We don't know. I don't know. I think I suspect my friend Rickard would probably tell me that Well, he did the other day. He said a capacitor is a capacitor, full stop. I don't think there are too many fruity differences between them. Not to, at least not as enough to warrant all this claimed thing. So my position is, so long as these work, then great. And as long as the pickups sound good, then good. That's what I'm aiming for. Right, just clearing up a few little bits, give myself some room. Move the lighting back out of, oh God, what is where? Move the lighting back out of electronics mode. This is a dangling wire as well. So you go over there, you go over there, you can go somewhere like that. You can get out of the way over there. Stay there. You can go out of the way. Oh no, I'll need that again in a minute for more cleaning. There's them and them. There's that and that. Right, this must be very, very boring indeed. You can go back on there for a minute. Fly through the sky. The greatest of ease. Got some nice new PRS 10s to go on here when all is ready. You can go out of the way. You can go up on there. You can go back in here. You can go in the bin. You can go in the bin. You can go there. You can go there. You can go there. See how quickly we can clear everything up. I'll need it all out again in seconds anyway, but it's nice feeling for a minute to be almost tidy. Midpoint dust down just to keep it as clean as possible. Right, here we go. So, the important part of the game now is making this thing play. So, we've cleaned it up on the fingerboard. Now is a good time to get some oil into the fretboard prior to stringing. So the next stage of this is going to be oil the fingerboard, restring, stretch out the strings, and then audition the pickups. Now, it's horribly subjective. I always say this about pickups. One person's pickup sounds brilliant, might not be another person's. So, you know, these Colin's got the originals, can always revert back to them if he prefers, but these iron gears have always been okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restring, stretch out the strings, and then just check and make sure the intonation's correct, okay, and then have a bit of a play. And then when we've had a bit of a play, check, as we're playing, check the tone and the tone of the pickups and the tone controls, see if they are working the way we'd like them to. And then the final question, once everything's been it's been strung up, and is to really just ask ourselves how the nut works. If it's working really well as is, then it's better to work on it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. The adjustable thing has an advantage in my book in that if you're a tweaker, then you can repeatedly set it to where you want it. That might not be anyone else's particular interest if it's set up once. Most customers I've set up with a new bone nut, it's been absolutely fine just the way it is, left it like that. But it might be a tweaker's paradise to be able to make adjustments regularly. However, it's offset against this is a solid unit that's already fitted in place and it has had some work done on it. Now, in many cases, there are often cases where, for example, if I do a refret, then often I just have to replace the nut, even if I like the original or it's working perfectly. And the reason for that is that, of course, new frets will usually end up being higher than the nut, so that you can't go upwards. You can always go downwards, and in the case of a fret level and setup like this, there's always a bit of room to go downwards. This one's got a kink in it already. I don't know if you'd know if that was something that you'd noticed, but anyway, shouldn't be a problem, but just to point out. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, it's usually possible to improve a nut that's already in place, and then it just, in this case, it will just be a sort of decision of, you know, will it feel much better. No, I'm tempted to. We've already sort of agreed, so we may well do it. I'll see how well that bass hardens up tomorrow and whether I'm happy with the hardness of it. Sometimes, occasionally, the Milliput is very sensitive to tiny variations in the mixture, Captain, and a couple of times it's not been as hard as I would like it, and I can't, and it's not very scientific to figure out how to get it where you want it. But anyway, we shall see. Alternatives are to make bases out of bone or some other material. I have got an idea to use some of this thermoplastic that Martin sent me a long while back. The only thing I haven't experimented with is how well it sands, because you have to be able to shape the final thing with sandpaper to get it to the, you know, a good looking unit. Anyway, let's see where we go. Joe Haynes. See, I remember Tokai's around the time back in the 80s when I bought my JV Squire. These are slight kinks in them, these strings. When I bought my JV Squire, which I no longer have, but you know, such is life. Anyway, when I bought that in 1983, I had originally wanted to get a USA Telecaster. I was kind of in love with the idea of it, but I didn't have the money, and so in the end I went for a Squire, which I could afford with the help of my friend Matthias's dad, I think, sort of standing guarantor for the payment duration, which was no problem. Oh, hang on a minute, hang on, I've got cats. But the alternative at the time was the Tokai's. Who's this? Come on. Who's meowing? Come on. No? Fine. My hospitality wasted. Yeah, and I seem to recall that in that period of time the Tokai's were being sniffed at a bit by you know, die-hard Fender fans who could sort of bring themselves to consider a Squire, but the Tokai was seen as this cheap Japanese usurper, you know. And I think there was some sort of issues with the, you know, the legal challenges from Fender at the time. Because they were, I think in the beginning they were only Fender models. I think there was certainly a Strat and a Telly. Anyway, yeah. So that was on the kind of horizon. I remember. Well, hello. I remember seeing them being discussed in the music press or something. Maybe it was, hello boy, NME or something. Mr. Morris, are you well? Yeah. How's things? All right. Yeah, good. You can jump up here if you wish. Say hello to folks, but you can't put your paws on this guitar. It's not allowed. You can sniff things. How's the world outside? Sorry about the bum shot. Everything good? Yeah. Yeah, you know those spiky strings aren't good for you. They're not good for me either. Alright, tell you what. Shall we install you on your throne? Come on, Morris. Let's go on your... Come on, mister. Let's go on your stool throne. we'll keep that door shut. There, and you can stay inside on your throne. No, we can go out and mess around. Whatever. Oh no. No! No, Morris. He's going to do it again. Actually, I can stop him. I can dissuade you, Morris. I'm sure I can. You don't want to go here because it's too dangerous. Go somewhere else now. Meep, 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 meep. Anyway. Yeah, so I just remember thinking at the time, I thought they looked great, the Tokais, but it was this quite edgy, it's quite edgy Challenger. I'm not, New Kid on the Block Challenger sort of brand, and I'm pretty certain that despite the legal issues, I'm sure that the same shop that I bought my JV Squire from had a couple of Tokais as alternatives, and I remember sort of looking at them thinking, ooh, that's nice, but I want the thing with the fender on it, albeit written fairly small. Now in the hindsight, of course, that the Squire was a good buy because they were turned out to be very well made, beautiful materials, great sounding, great to play, and something of a collector's item. And the reason I sold mine is I didn't play it enough. It didn't make me want to play it. And actually, in a way, I'm not in my Strat phase at the moment. I'm not in a Strat phase, so I don't really have a need for a Strat. I've got one that's a parts caster, which I love, and that does me, fulfills whatever need I have, but it doesn't actually, I haven't played it, or I haven't taken it out. In fact, I haven't played it for probably a couple of months, if not more. So at the moment I'm in Telecasters meets homemade guitar, homemade headless Oakcaster mode with a double cut Les Paul double cut homemade custom as well to choose from. And a single coil only twang doesn't feature in my list of requirements at the moment. So I'm going to stretch out as much as possible these new strings, get them bedded in, and just manually, before really going anywhere near the amp, for a second. So my couple of points of interest is how well does the nut work? Does it, is it keeping good tune? How well do the pickups sound? Are they, is it giving a cleaner, crisper tone than before? Nice to settle down over there now. So what I'll do is I'll just take a note off the thing now. Looking good. Okay, well, straight away go into the stretchy game again. Now this guitar came with a broken string, so I don't know yet how sharp these saddles are. It may be a problem with that lovely gold bridge. Sometimes you find that a particular saddle on a particular bridge just keeps breaking strings. Now I don't know that it is the case, but it's always something to kind of watch out for when you get a guitar with a string already broken. You're thinking, what caused that? Could just be bad luck and playing, but it could also be a knife edge down here. That ping is the slot gripping. If I'm not mistaken, was that the A that creaked? We shall see in a minute. So I'm just going to do a little bit more stretching. Be very careful. I have got 10s actually. Yeah, right, it's the D. So at this point, you can really hear the nuances of the nut without plugging it in. Plug it in, you'll not pick it up. But you can really hear which strings are moving smoothly through the slot, and this one isn't. So I'm going to get the very fine thing here, and I'm going to concentrate just for a minute on a little bit of widening and try to avoid any lowering, because it's pretty low as it stands. Now that went on without a creak. I'm no good at bending 10s. Okay, so I'm happy with the mechanics of that and the action and everything. So now let's bring up the old tinny cube. Everyone should have a cube. You know that. Let's just hook up the guitar. Now I'm not in inspired playing mode. Not that I play inspiredly anyway, but just, you know. People go, well, don't you play in a band? Well, they don't go that. In my head I go, don't you play in a band? I go, well, yeah, but I just play sort of some rhythm stuff and mostly disappear into the background. That's okay. That is cleaner. There's no doubt about that. Zero gain. Pretty much everything off. So this is quite a fairly big volume jump between the bridge and the neck. Seems to have a higher output. Maybe that's how it is. I didn't look at the specifications, but those caps work perfectly well. do me. Okay, so I'm going to call that quits for now. This is the Tokai, I don't know what model it is, Tokai Les Paul copy. I'm going to do a little bit of polishing, dusting and stuff, double check the action off camera, but what I'll also do is I'll also leave it till tomorrow and reconsider the nut and see how those inserts have gone. Yeah, lovely. Job done. Okay. See you later. Or see you tomorrow. Oh, just a quick thing. I forgot the intonation, but I've got the tuner in the house. So I'll do it in the house, but it looks pretty well set. But don't worry, it'll be done. Just won't be on this video right now. Okay, thanks for watching. See you again. Of course, I also forgot to put the truss rod cover back on. So, you bleeding devil. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, you'll be getting the phone interference. Oh, it's all. What is wrong with you? Yes. Get in there. Right. Move that. Do that. You do this. Do that. Yep. Sorry. Yes, done. Anyway, finally. Just the intonation and the nut to look at. I'll see you back on this video actually to do the nut, but I'll sort of have a play with it indoors just to see. Anyway, there you go, just a last look at this beauty. Tokai Les Paul copy, I guess we call it. What have I done for it? Well, I've cured those choked out bends up there, lowered the, well, flattened the neck a little bit, tidied up the nut slots, leveled the frets, changed the pickups and put in some orange drop capacitors, which work pretty well actually, considering they are Chinese sourced orange drops, but they work. So there you go. Right, see you tomorrow.